welcome to North of 48. It's April 14th. It's plus 8 degrees Celsius in northern Canada. And I want to welcome Metta Spencer. I have a short bio that I'd like to share with everybody before we bring her on. Peace researcher and activist. After completing a PhD in sociology in 1969 at the University of California, Berkeley, she joined the Department of Sociology at the University of Toronto's Arundel College in 1971. She taught regular in the university's Peace and Conflict Studies, which she founded in 1989 and coordinated until her retirement in 1997. In 1976, Spencer authored the Foundations of Modern Sociology textbook, which was subsequently published in 4 American and 7 Canadian editions. And if my memory serves me, there was 52,000 copies sold the first year, and now they're all over the world.
It's amazing you know these things.
That's fine. Metta Spencer is specialized in peace and war studies, has been active in the Canadian peace movement. She is the founding president and director of the Canadian Disarmament Information Service, CANDIS. She published the monthly peace calendar from 1983 to 1985, and the publication morphed into a magazine format, subsequently called the Peace Magazine. In 2009, Spencer organized the Zero Nuclear Weapons Public Forum in Toronto, jointly sponsored by 4 major Canadian peace organizations with which she has been involved since the mid-1980s. Physicians for Global Survival, Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate organization Pugwash, Conferences on Science and World Affairs, and Science for Peace. She has also researched peace and conflict extensively in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. In 1997, she organized the Lessons of Yugoslavia, a 3-day Science for Peace conference at the University of Toronto. In 2011, she published The Russian Quest for Peace and Democracy, the culmination of 28 years of research and hundreds of interviews with Russian politicians and activists. She argues that Western peace activists' influence on Russians, including Gorbachev, helped end the Cold War more so than the pressure from the US or NATO. More recently, Spencer has become involved in climate change activism by chairing, since 2007, the Science for Peace Committee to study and campaign for carbon taxation policy. She's researched social change through storytelling in her book, 2 Aspirins and a Comedy: How Television Can Enhance Health and Society. She argues that television could be a force for health and social change.
Wow, you know a lot about me.
Well, it's not done yet. Some of her awards: Confederation Medal awarded by the Governor General for service to Canada in 1992, Global Citizen Award from the United Nations in 1995, United Nations Association in Canada Award in 1999, and her books, Adolescent Prejudice, Foundations of Modern Sociology, 2 Aspirins and a Comedy, The Russian Quest for Peace and Democracy. And Metta, I'm pleased to have you on here.
I'm very honored and surprised.
Well, I'm so happy that we could get together. And I found you because you've been having a podcast since 2016, I believe, and YouTube show, and it was our mutual.
I think it was more like 18 or 2019.
Okay, well, your memory's better than mine.
Well, actually, the thing you showed me was actually from these kind of a memoir that I was recording. You know, most people when they get old write their stories up for their grandchildren, but I haven't done that. I just sat and spent 5 minutes every day telling my story. And then I made it available online. So yes, the thing that you put up was from that. And I was surprised because that was several years ago, probably about 2016. Yeah.
Well, I hope it wasn't for private family because it's out on the internet. So
yeah, I believe in radical transparency. So there are things there that most people wouldn't talk about, and I don't.
Well, yes, that's true. And I totally enjoyed them. And I think towards the end with our audience, I'd like to, your number 100 episode of that was very well done. and very powerful. So I hope we can share that with people. Somebody has to go in and do your Wikipedia page, because there's more to you than what I have just read. And to do it justice, I should have got a British person to read it, instead of my Northern Canadian accent. But no. So I'm just going to share I really want to talk about your project, Save the World. Let me just share the website on that, to savetheworld.ca.
Mm-hmm.
And one-stop directory. You have some heavy hitters with you as editors.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just quite amazing. What prompted you? What is the mission of Project Save the World?
My sense is, I've been doing peace work for many, many years, but it turns out, obviously everybody knows, that war and peace are not the only issues in the world that are threatening human survival. And I figure there are at least 6 things that any one of them could wipe out 1 billion people in a whack under certain circumstances. And so I figured we need to have kind of a meeting place where all of these people who work separately in different silos on these 6 different global issues can find a place where they can see what other people are doing and see how they're connected, because these 6 threats, many of them are very interdependent. We're dealing with a system, and parts of it all interact with all the other parts. So we have war and weapons, which has been always my focus, but now, of course, global warming, climate change, and so on, and then famine, because we've almost eradicated famine for a while, but it's coming back and it's going to be with us. And we have pandemics. Obviously, we picked pandemics before COVID hit. Nobody thought pandemics could happen, but we did. And then cyber risks, we're now exposed to all kinds of things that they could knock out. I understand in the paper the last couple of days that some of the Canadian infrastructure could be knocked out. They've got control of it if they want. Cyber risks and the radioactivity, the access to not only things like Chernobyl, but mining and the waste products and the various kinds of ways in which we can be damaged by radioactive exposure. So these 6 global threats are largely interdependent. And then so we have a page for each of them where people can comment and have discussions and post things that they've come across. It's sort of like Facebook, but easier to, some of the disadvantages of Facebook aren't there. And then we have these 3 what I call sector issues, that is policy sectors like the economy or civil society and governance, how we govern ourselves, and problems of human rights issues where government is not protecting people. So each of these areas has a sector, a large part of the website where people can comment and share ideas, as well as there's an events column. And then, of course, all of the shows that I've been making, the forums to discuss various aspects of these global threats. That's the fun I've been having. It's really, really been a pleasure.
Have you noticed a change with the politicians? Like, is the government or politicians amiable to help you with this project?
I haven't even asked. I haven't asked for a nickel from anybody. Right. But I've pretty much spent my life savings. So whoever takes over is going to have to go around with a hat or someplace and do some fundraising. And I'm trying to find ways of turning it over to people who want to take it to the next generation.
Right. Is there a donation button on your website?
No, we haven't. We have not collected money, whatever, at all for this. And That I haven't worried about it,
Okay.
but we will certainly. We're just in the process of incorporating in Ontario as a not-for-profit organization,
Okay.
and when we do that, we will apply for charitable status.
Mhm.
And if that's approved, which I certainly have my hopes, we will then be able to appeal to organizations for grants. I think it'll cost something like $150,000 a year to keep it going
Right.
because we have employees who have to do the work,
Mhm.
and there are some minor expenses on maintaining the website. Fortunately, it's very cheap nowadays to make the magazine because instead of printing it as a paper copy, which is what we were doing until a little over a year ago, we've gone just to digital now. And the advantage to that is that, we can serve people all around the world. Not that we've done enough publicity to make a significant audience yet, but the truth is that it doesn't pay to mail a paper magazine to, Zimbabwe or Malawi or someplace.
Mhm.
And so but it's easy for people to subscribe to a PDF or something like that.
Right, and email it out to them or something. That's
Mhm.
correct. Well, I really hope, especially for the next generation, that somebody picks up the reins. I think it's remarkable and that you're doing this, and it seems to be a project dear to your heart.
It is,
So,
absolutely.
all
Yeah.
right. And I'm going to put the links in so people can delve more
Mhm.
into the show notes. Well, you were born in America.
We're in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you had an epiphany, I think, at an early age, if I was reading correctly, on kind of how you wanted to live your life.
Well, everybody has a series of moments. Not sure which one you did, but you're referring to. But I think one of the turning points for me came at about the time of the 3 Mile Island disaster, when I for looked like for a while there would be a number of people, a million, maybe 100,000 or something, people might have been exposed to lethal dose of radiation. So I was thinking, suppose I were one of those people. Suppose I knew that I'm already as good as dead, but I've got probably 6 months to live before I'll die. What would I want to do? And I thought, well, I would hope that I could find something that it would be worth to give my life for, so that I could, whatever I could sacrifice my life for would be something I could do that would be a contribution instead of just waiting for it to all fizzle out. And then I thought, of course I'd do that now if I knew of anything, but there isn't. You don't have an opportunity to do anything special very often. But I think we all need to live our lives in ways, looking for ways of doing something bigger than just routine. And I'm actually writing a little article about that now, because I think when I say this is Project Save the World, a lot of people come and they'll straighten me out. You're not going to save the world, and I don't know what to tell them. I mean, well, don't you think it needs to be saved? Or, well, you can join with me and we can save it together. Or, I don't know what to say. But the point is that they oftentimes have this. They're actually disapproving of anybody who thinks that they can do anything to save the world. And I think, well, there's a lot we got to save it from, and everybody can do it, but people don't like the idea of getting too ambitious. And I think we should always be looking for ways of expanding our goals and making them bigger. And so that was kind of the insight that I had, is that I really want to find something that I can absolutely say I'll give my life for.
Well
And
said.
at that point, there were only, they about 6 months later or something, they were beginning to organize people in meetings to protest against the Euro missiles. So this was the big disarmament movement of that period, the 80s, and I found out there were 50,000 nuclear weapons on the planet, and I had thought, well, there might be 50. I had no idea, but then it occurred to me, okay, that's my goal, that's my goal. Getting rid of nuclear weapons, that's worth my life for sure. Mm-hmm. So I think there's something really satisfying, let's say, about knowing that you have a purpose, that you don't care how much it costs.
Well said. And I admire your attitude on that. And you're right. We should all live with the purpose. There is so much to your life, Metta, that I hope if I'm skipping along too quick, just by all means talk over me, because I'd like to now talk a little bit about your time in Berkeley. You were in a dorm that had men and women, but you had Black people and Caucasians in the same building, which I don't know what year that was, but I think it was special to do that. When was it?
1949 is when I went to
49. Okay.
49. I just turned 18. And
right.
Yes, it was quite special, an interracial co-op, and it was an independent co-op. It was, there were no house mothers or no authority. And of course, what happens? You have pretty liberal attitudes there. And it turns out these were, to this day, I don't know about some of these people. Some of them became well-known leaders in for example, one guy became a very famous Black psychiatrist and so on. But these were really very creative people. And actually, it was also the year of the oath. The loyalty oath was that year. And I arrived just in time to get involved with all of the movements of people who were, a lot of the faculty members either were sacked or they moved away rather than sign the oath. So I became an activist almost immediately. And I would say later I found out that apparently several members of the people living in the house where I lived were communists. And I to this day, I don't know which ones were.
Oh, wow. And then, you went on to further studies over at Harvard after Berkeley, or is there something else with Berkeley you want to talk?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in Berkeley many years, and then I was working. Well, I was research assistant for Seymour Martin Lipset, who was in those days, I guess, in many years, he was probably the most prominent political sociologist anywhere. And I happened to be his research assistant. And when he moved to Harvard, I did too, a little bit later. And I was at Harvard a couple of years. 1 year I worked for him, and then I worked with a man named Alex Enkelis on the study of modernization in third world countries. And then I was, at that same time, I was teaching at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, which was at that point housed in the Salada Tea Building because they didn't have a campus yet.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, how did you had a child too, right?
Yes, my son was born in 1960. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. That's a good time. He's a year older than me, so I hope he still has his hair.
He does. Oh, it's sort of like yours. It's receding.
There you go. Oh, you can tell. Huh? I need better lighting here.
Lighting does wonders for you.
What brought you to Canada? Can I ask that?
Well, where, when you get your PhD, you go on the job market, which is, universities it's a global market. And I almost took a couple of jobs. I had several offers in Washington, D.C. But then I got this one offer in Toronto, which I think has been a real blessing. It was a good place, I think, a better place to raise a child, more stable environment than some other places that I might have been. He went to the Toronto French School, and so it was. I felt very blessed in being able to live here. We're living in a very good society, you and I. You know.
Okay. Could I ask you? Did you find a change from the U.S. to Canada as far as? Well, I don't know. You had the loyalty oath in America and all that, and
well,
I don't think
there was the Vietnam War going on at the time.
Yes.
So of course, and then there were student movements going on. I would say I did not become particularly active immediately in Canada. I really had a lot on my plate. I was actually working, not only teaching and trying to raise a son, but also I was quite interested in a number of personal issues. I got interested in psychotherapy and the way that different cultures have different elements that can be therapeutic. So I was looking at the way, especially Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion had become involved with some of the, this was the 70s, and this was a time when everybody was in encounter groups or things like you must have been too. So encounter groups, or I was in EST, or I did primal therapy and that kind of thing. I was very interested in that and trying to situate it in a cultural context. I never what I wrote about it, I don't think I ever really amounted to much, but that was a good part of what I was doing for a while. And that orientation, which I sort of developed in California. Californians join all kinds of self-discovery groups, but to some extent it continued here when I moved to Canada for several years.
Well, I was also watching a video of you talking about the John Kennedy assassination. Could you talk a little bit about that? Maybe the letter you sent to Lyndon Johnson?
It wasn't Kennedy's assassination. It was some other kid, an 18-year-old. Actually, I was living in University Village, which was it had been housing for military people during the war, but it was converted to a student village. Graduate students lived there.
Okay.
And I was watching television, and here was an 18-year-old boy in Vietnam dying, and I saw him die. And I grabbed up a felt tip pen and I wrote murder on it, and I sent it to Lyndon Johnson, feeling, it was murder. and that one word. Okay, I had my return address on it. And later, a month or two later, knock at the door, two guys, they were Secret Service. And they pulled this thing out and they said, "Did you write this?" And I said, "Yes." "He's a murderer." "Oh, well, we thought maybe you were threatening you were going to murder him." So I said, "Well, come on in." And we talked, and they agreed with me. Yeah, this is murder. Like 18-year-old kids shouldn't have been in Vietnam doing this kind of thing. So anyway, I kind of felt, I kind of felt like the air was letting out of me, that a tire deflating or something. What the hell? You can't say or do anything that makes any difference. And it was sort of like I kind of stopped being an activist for, must have been 3 or 4 years at least, maybe more.
Wow. The subsequent assassinations of Martin Luther and Robert Kennedy, and so I caught the tail end of that. I became aware, I think, once I started learning to read, 68 or something like that. How did you feel? Because all of a sudden you were an activist, you're on pause, and then all of a sudden these other assassinations happen. What were your thoughts then, or can you remember?
Of course, everybody was horrified. I was at Harvard at the time. I was living in Cambridge,
Right.
And I had been actually involved with the one of the McCarthy. I'm trying to think of the date.
Yeah, it was Eugene McCarthy.
Yeah,
right?
Eugene McCarthy. I've been involved with his campaign, but I hadn't done much. But at any rate, I was also disappointed. I was working for Seymour Martin Lipset, who in fact was writing speeches for Hubert Humphrey. This was a time, immediately after this period was one where the election was coming up, and Humphrey finally was the candidate, and Lipset was the speechwriter for him, or a speechwriter for him. Mm-hmm. And I had such trouble. I remember having, the only choice I had was between Nixon and Humphrey. So I voted for Humphrey, but oh my God, there was no anti-war candidate. And I don't know what would have happened if Robert Kennedy had survived. Do you have a thought about that? Because people say he would have changed things, but I don't know. I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, I've only seen the documentaries on him, and then he was hesitant to get involved, and then he met Chavez, right, in California. Yeah. And then I think he changed, personally, I'd like to think that he changed himself personally from, because he was a rough and tough attorney general, right? And I think he became more passionate or sympathetic to people's plight. I think he probably would have been a good president, but Eugene McCarthy, he was just a heck of an individual from what I've read and seen of him. So you must have really seen something in him, eh?
Well, he was the best of was. I mean, yes. There wasn't any real hope in those days of being able to immediately turn on a dime and get the kind of changes that we needed. The Vietnam War just went on, and it was a miserable situation.
Do you find, I don't know how much, if you probably pay attention to American politics, do you find the same sort of cycle happening again, where you're choosing the best of two evils?
That's always the case. Yeah, I mean, I voted for Biden. Mm-hmm. And he's done some very good things, but not as much as he would like. I would have liked to have been able to vote for Bernie Sanders.
Mm. If I was American, I would vote for Bernie. I'll tell you that. That would have been very nice. Mm-hmm. I think we're just going to take a pause, if you don't mind, and then we'll come back for part two. Mm-hmm.